right, let's dive in. Back again for another deep dive.
We always get requests, and this one is pretty specific. Mike's Weapons Facts, episode 188. Got a whole stack of transcripts here, but 188, it's got something special, doesn't it?
It really does. There's something about that episode that kind of sums up, well, everything about that show, doesn't it?
Right. And the request was to, well, figure out how these guys, Mike and Rickard, how their personalities and their, let's be honest, their drinking habits affect what they tell us about weapons.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can't separate the personalities from the information, can you? Especially with a show like Mike's Weapons Facts.
Exactly. So should we start with Mike? I mean, the guy's got a story for everything.
Yeah, Mike, he's quite a character, a real storyteller. The kind of guy who, well, let's just say he likes to embellish.
Embellish. That might be putting it mildly. I mean, his stories about his dad, Gasbold, who knows what's true there.
Right. Gasbold, this legendary military figure.
Yeah.
Every story is wilder than the last. And it's not just Gasbold. Mike brings that same energy to talking about weapons. Like in episode 37, he's talking about drinking doppelkorn while they're recording.
Doppelkorn on the air. Yeah, that's Mike. Always adds a little something extra to the mix, doesn't he?
And that's what we got to figure out, right? Does the alcohol, does it affect what he's saying?
Yeah.
I mean, he gets pretty intense sometimes, like in episode 155, where he's praising, well, Hitler and Stalin.
Yeah, episode 155, that was a wild one. Even for Mike, that was pushing it.
And that's where Rickard comes in, right? He's supposed to be the voice of reason, the guy who keeps Mike in check.
The straight man. Well, sometimes. But then Rickard goes off on his own tangents, too.
Oh, yeah. In that same episode, he's ranting about chemtrails.
Mm.
Someone for the voice of reason.
Right. It's that constant back and forth. They play off each other, bounce these wild ideas around.
And that makes it hard to tell, is it all just a show? Are they serious about any of it? Especially when they're talking about war, history, things that are, well, pretty serious stuff.
Absolutely. It's entertaining, sure, but it also makes you wonder how much of it is real.
Right. So we've got Mike, the storyteller, always pushing the limits. Rickard, the unpredictable counterpoint.
Yeah.
And they're both, well, they like their drinks.
A potent combination, to say the least.
And then we get to episode 188, the one you all wanted us to look at. And it's like they float a switch. Suddenly, they're experts on the FG-42. Details, history, the whole 9 yards.
The FG-42 deep dive, it's almost jarring how different it feels from their usual stuff.
But even then, even in their serious mode, they managed to squeeze in a shout-out to their sponsor. That liquor store, Schwatten.
Schwatten, of course. It's like they can't escape it, can they?
And then there's that listener request. The one where they're asked to re-record the whole episode as drunk pirates.
Drunk pirates talking about the FG-42. Yeah, that's the kind of request they get.
So how do we even approach this? It's like they're playing with us, with the information, with the whole idea of what a podcast should be.
It's a performance, right? But is there any substance beneath the act? That's what we have to figure out.
Right. So to understand episode 188, we got to look at it through the lens of everything we know about Mike and Rickard. The good, the bad, and the boozy.
And remember, you asked us to focus on this particular episode, 188. We'll use the other sources as context, but really try to understand what's going on within 188.
So episode 188, the FG-42, what do they actually say about it? I mean, do they even get the basics right?
It's surprising. They start off pretty strong, actually give a decent overview of the weapon. They got the history right, World War II, German paratroopers designed for, jumping out of planes and then fighting right away.
Okay, so they got that part right. I was half expecting them to say it was like a Viking battle axe or something.
Right. But no, they stick to the facts, at least at first.
Yeah.
They even explain why it was designed that way, the whole idea of needing something compact for the jump, but also powerful enough for combat.
Ah, so that's why they call it a hybrid. A rifle and a submachine gun, all in one.
But do they go beyond that? Like, do they get into the nitty-gritty, the technical stuff?
Oh, yeah, they do. They actually get pretty specific about the features. Talk about the folding stock, the muzzle brake, even the bayonet lug. And they're accurate, too. It's like they actually did some research for once.
Wow. Color me impressed. I mean, Mike especially, he's not exactly known for his attention to detail. But do they mention how it actually performed, like in battle?
They do. And they actually give a balanced view, talking about both the good and the bad. They highlight the strengths, the accuracy, the high rate of fire. They even explain how the muzzle brake helped reduce recoil.
So they're not just listing facts, they're actually explaining how those features worked.
Yeah, and they don't shy away from the downsides either. They talk about how expensive and complicated it was to make, how it overheated easily, difficult to maintain. All true, by the way.
Sounds like a fascinating weapon. Full of potential, but also, with some issues. Is that how they present it? Yeah, pretty much. And they even connect it to a bigger idea, talking about German military doctrine in World War II. They bring up the whole concept of wonder weapons, those technologically advanced weapons the Germans obsessed over.
Okay, now that's interesting. So they're taking this specific rifle and tying it to a larger historical trend.
Exactly. They argue that the FG-42, with its limited production and all the maintenance problems, it's like a perfect example of that German tendency to, prioritize innovation over practicality, which I gotta say is a pretty insightful observation for them.
I know, right? Never thought I'd hear myself say that about Mike and Rickard. But even when they stumble onto a good point, they can't resist bringing it back to their favorite topic, booze.
Oh, absolutely. They joke that maybe the Germans should have focused more on beer instead of fancy weapons. Classic Mike and Rickard, undercutting a serious point with a joke.
So they're acknowledging the limits of technology, even in war.
Yeah.
That's a pretty sophisticated argument for a couple of guys who usually seem more interested in the bottom of a glass.
It is, and it makes you wonder, are they being ironic? Or are they genuinely engaging with these ideas? It's hard to tell with them, which is what makes this episode so fascinating.
It's like they accidentally stumbled into a nuanced discussion about technology, war, human choices.
And they do it all while cracking jokes and plugging their favorite liquor store. It's this weird mix of insight and absurdity that makes Mike's weapons facts so unique.
Okay, so we've established they actually provide some good info about the FG-42 in this episode. History, technical details, combat performance, even some historical context. But how do we square that with everything else we know about them?
That's the big question, isn't it? Does this episode show a genuine interest in the topic? Or is it just another act? Are they capable of being serious and informative? Or are they always playing a role?
Especially with that listener request hanging over their heads. You know the one where they're asked to re-record the whole thing as drunk pirates? It's like they're daring us to take them seriously.
It's like they're saying, hey, we can be informative if we want to, but don't forget, we're also capable of being completely ridiculous.
So where does that leave us? How do we separate the fact from the fiction, the insight from the shtick? It's like they're constantly messing with our expectations.
And that's exactly what we need to unpack. We need to move beyond the content of episode 188 and look at the bigger picture, Mike's weapons facts as a whole.
Okay, so we're shifting gears now from the specifics of the FG-42 to the broader context of the show. This is where things get really interesting.
It is. Because to really understand episode 188, we have to grapple with the complexities of Mike and Rickard. Their personalities, their humor, their willingness to blur the lines between information and entertainment.
So where do we go from here? I mean, we've got this episode 188, surprisingly good info about the FG-42, but it's still Mike and Rickard, with all their baggage.
It's a puzzle, isn't it? Episode 188, it really makes you think about all the different layers of this show. Mike's weapons facts. We can't just take what they say at face value.
It's like they're playing a game with us, giving us some real information, but then throwing in these curveballs, making us question everything. And then that listener request, the drunk pirate thing, just throws another wrench in the works.
Right. It's like they're saying, hey, don't get too comfortable, but that makes it even harder to figure out what they really want us to think. Are they trying to teach us something? Or just mess with us? Or maybe both?
Yeah, I mean, they obviously know something about weapons, about history, but they also seem to enjoy just making stuff up, or at least exaggerating things a little, a lot.
And that's where we, the listeners, have to step up. We can't just sit back and absorb whatever they tell us. We have to listen critically, question their claims, do our own research, be skeptical.
So it's not enough to just enjoy the show, right? We have to engage with it, be aware of their biases, be ready to fact check them. It's a lot of work.
It is, but it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, Mike's weapons facts is a reflection of Mike and Rickard, their personalities, their experiences, their sense of humor, and that makes it entertaining, but it also means we have to be extra careful about what we believe.
So listening to this show is like walking a tightrope, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be constantly aware of where you're stepping.
That's a great way to put it. But here's the thing. Even if they're not the most reliable source of information, they do get you thinking. They spark your curiosity about history, about weapons.
So We shouldn't dismiss them entirely, but we should definitely take everything they say with a grain of salt. Maybe a whole shaker of salt.
Exactly. Appreciate their entertainment value, their humor, their passion, but don't forget their limitations and their tendency to, well, to prioritize a good story over the truth.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they keep in mind when they listen to Mike's weapons facts, especially episode 188?
Listen with a critical ear. Enjoy the ride, laugh at the jokes, but don't take everything they say as gospel. Do your own research, double-check their facts, and come to your own conclusions.
So they're giving us a starting point, not the final answer.
Exactly. They're sparking a conversation, not giving a lecture, and that's what makes them so interesting, even if it's frustrating sometimes. They make you think for yourself.
It sounds like Mike's weapons facts, as messy as it is, actually teaches us something really important about how to be smart consumers of information.
Absolutely. Shows how important it is to be aware of biases, to question everything, to double-check information, especially in a world where entertainment and information are getting more and more mixed up.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Episode 188, Mike and Rickard's personalities, the whole Mike's weapons facts experience. It's been a journey.
And hopefully we've given you some tools to make sense of it all. To navigate the world of Mike's weapons facts, remember, listen critically, do your research, and form your own opinions. So even though our deep dive is ending, the conversation doesn't have to stop. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning about history and weapons, but do it in a way that feels right for you.
And remember, there's always more to discover, more to learn, more perspectives to consider. That's what makes this whole journey so exciting.